Greetings and salutations to everyone near and far. I want to welcome you to the Being Black Abroad presentation, which is very dear to me based on my own experiences studying abroad as a Black woman. Black folks in general are severely underrepresented in education abroad, so I think it's really important to create a space to understand what the experience is like for us who do engage in this high impact learning opportunity. Just to frame the conversation, you'll hear me use the term ABC a lot throughout the presentation. That's because at UC Santa Cruz, we use the term to be inclusive of an array of Black identities. So that includes African, African American, Afro Latino, Black, and Caribbean. I also want to acknowledge that this is a precarious time to be talking about studying abroad given the current global pandemic, but it is our hope that the world does heal soon. And when it does, that you'll consider incorporating a study abroad or away experience into your academic degree plan. So to start us out, I just want to start by introducing myself. My name is Ashley Bayman. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm a study abroad program coordinator and advisor at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Really, I'm just so grateful to even be able to speak with you all in this space based on my own personal experiences as an ABC student who was able to study abroad 3 times. I actually started out in community college, and when I was there, I went on my first study abroad faculty-led program in Mexico during a summer for 4 weeks. When I first transferred to the university, I was like 25, I think. So I was considered a non-traditional transfer student of color. I was a first-generation college student, a low-income college student. I worked as a waitress to support myself throughout my college career. So statistically, study abroad really should have never been in the cards for me, but it was an opportunity that I sought out anyway, and it really did change my life. So when I got in the university, I studied abroad in another faculty-led program in the summer in Brazil, and then for an entire semester in Argentina. And I just mentioned that study abroad changed my life, and it's what allowed me to be in this space to talk with you all today. When I graduated from college, to be quite honest, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my degrees. And because of those really meaningful, impactful experiences I had by living and learning abroad, it's what pushed me to pursue a master's in international education and to become a study abroad program coordinator and advisor. And I'll be sharing a lot of personal anecdotes and experiences throughout this presentation. So of course, we want our panelists to introduce themselves. Would you guys all just give a brief introduction, maybe in the order that you guys are here on the slide? Starting with Chelsea.
Sure. Yeah. My Wi-Fi is a little unstable, so if you need me to repeat anything, just let me know. But hello, everyone. My name is Chelsea Boykin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm a graduating senior, about to get out of here. And I studied abroad my junior year in Barbados, and I was gone for 2 quarters, winter and spring, and I was there for a semester.
Aya?
Hi, my name is Aya, or Ayodele, and I'm an environmental studies major. And I just this past winter quarter studied abroad in Cordoba, Spain, and it was awesome. I had a great time. It was about 3 months, I think, maybe a little less than 3 months. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Talufa Maloney, and I'm a 5th year graduating as well. And I recently just came back from Paris, studying abroad, winter 2020.
Hi, my name is Alexis, she, her pronouns. I'm a creative writing major, and I also just came back from Paris this past winter quarter, studying there.
Great. Thank you guys so much. And I'll have a lot more to share later with you all. So diving right in, let's discuss why you should consider studying abroad or away. There's a lot of personal growth that happens when one studies abroad. I remember, I think Tolu, you talked about it in a survey that you filled out for us, like your increase in confidence of just like moving yourself like independently through different, I think you talked about your independent trip to Portugal, which I hope you'll speak on later. But
Yeah,
yeah, the
absolutely.
confidence. No, I'm sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with you. Absolutely. There's a lot of confidence that you build and just your self independence and just seeing what you can actually overcome and what you can do.
Thank you. And also going abroad to learn a new language. Aya, I know you mentioned that one of the reasons that you're really excited to study in Spain was to learn Spanish. You want to speak to that quickly?
Yeah, it was really fun. And like I mean, in California we pretty much learn Mexican Spanish, and so it was very different learning Spain Spanish. I don't know if that makes sense. Like the dialect was very different, but it was still really awesome, and I think beneficial in building my confidence in Spanish in general.
Absolutely. I think all of our panelists could agree that as much learning happens outside of the classroom as inside of the classroom, if not more learning happens outside of the classroom, because you're always in these different spaces and interacting with different people and having different conversations, something that just doesn't happen to the same extent when you're at UCSC. Yes, you're navigating different spaces and engaging with different people, but when you look at it in a cultural context sense, you learn about the culture inside the classroom, but you actually experience the culture when you're outside of the classroom. You develop so many new relationships. Students go abroad for heritage-seeking reasons or to participate in a diasporic community. So that's where you go abroad to connect with, your ancestral roots or any community that has historical, cultural ties to you or your family. A lot of people don't realize all of the career preparedness that study abroad actually instills in you. I mean, you could study abroad and participate in an internship, for example, or you can conduct international research, or just all the different soft skills you gain, like flexibility, adaptability, working with people from diverse communities, all look great on a resume. And if you study abroad on like a faculty-led program where you're really gaining a close relationship with faculty, that's someone who can, later you can use to write a recommendation letter for graduate school admissions. Clarifying your own interests and life goals, that's the only reason I'm here talking to you now. I had no idea what I wanted to do after I graduated college with a degree in Spanish and Latin American studies. And now I'm in this space where I can get other students to participate in what put me in this space in the first place. And then really looking at exploring your own identity. So I have this quote here from a student. She was an ABC student who studied abroad in West Africa. And she said that when she was abroad, she had this realization that at one point, I was almost experiencing the opposite of what I had grown up with. Because being in the US as an African American and someone who grew up in predominantly white schools, I was always very aware of my race. I would have moments when I'd be sitting in class, just listening, whatever. And then I look around and see, oh, actually, I'm the only person of color in this whole classroom. But in Western Africa, I really was able to live without that being a factor at all. I never thought about it, except when I was realizing that I just fit in. So really being able to connect to yourself in a way that you might not have anticipated. So we're going to go into some different study abroad considerations. This is not, an all-inclusive list. If there's other considerations we don't talk about, please let me know, but let's get a little bit of the 411. So whenever someone asks me, like, what are the most salient parts of my identity? I might say, being a multiracial female, being an equity-minded practitioner, being a Midwesterner, what have you. But I never think to say, oh, I'm American. Like, my American identity is something that strongly defines me. And really, when you think about it, we have, as ABC folks, a complicated relationship with the US, just given, like, looking at historical context. And in looking at these complicated feelings about our relationship to America, abroad, it might be, difficult or even confusing identifying and confronting our Americanness. But while we're abroad, we may have to, because a lot of the values that we hold are inherently American, such as free speech, independence, equality, directness, informality, individuality, all of which might differ from the host country cultural norms. I remember in speaking with Chelsea, she was just talking to me about, I didn't realize that it was even a privilege to be able to talk about different issues that we can here in the US, like abortion or, issues that affect the LGBTQIA plus community. So in certain respects, we might find ourselves in the position of defending America or American values when we're also critiquing it while we're here in the country. Something else that might happen when we're abroad as an ABC student is not being identified as American. I've had students tell me like, yeah, I was in China and I'd say that I was American, and they'd be like, but no, where are you really from? Because I don't think this comes out of, a place of spite, but more just like ignorance, because the media has represented people from the US in a certain light, typically being white, blonde, etc. Here I want to share a video from a student who studied abroad in England and what it was like not being identified as American because of his skin color.
Black.
Can you hear now?
Being a Black American in
Yes.
England, I think, or maybe just in Europe, but specifically here, because a lot of people ask me more here than anywhere else, is like, are you really American? Like, what do you think American looks like? Like, they have this concept that Americans are like white. That's problematic. Like, they ask me, like, I'm like, oh, American. They're like, oh, but what really are you? It's like, someone in America said that, that would be so racist. Next question is like, are your parents American? It's like, yes. Oh, are their parents American? Yes. They were all freaking born here. Unless you go back 200 years ago, then they weren't. They're like, oh, well, you look Caribbean, or you look like you're from Somalia or like South Africa. And I'm like, yes, well, I'm pretty sure somewhere down the line in my history does go back there. But just because my skin color is that way now does not mean I'm not American. I was born in America. I'm full-fledged American. Like, oh, like how'd you get to America? Like, why are you over there? It's like, what do you think America's comprised of? Like, it does not make any sense.
So yeah, I just thought that that video, like, he's in England, like a country that, is supposed to have such close ties to the US, and yet that ignorance still exists. Another consideration when studying abroad is, the shift in privilege. In the US, we do have a higher average annual salary than many countries in the world. In fact, I'd almost say all except for those in Europe and the UK. So really, identifying as a low-income student in the US is going to look really different when you're in a different cultural context, depending on, the economics of that particular country that you're traveling to. You can see some of the statistics here on average annual salaries. Another thing we don't think about is just the privilege that we have to access a higher education. In many countries in the world, there still exists gender inequality in education, and you can see what those look like, what some of those countries are here. But also just having the privilege to study abroad. I mean, just the privilege of having a US passport opens so many more doors than what other people from other places have access to. So, being able to study abroad, and you may or may not have to get a visa depending on how long you're there. So just some things to keep in mind when you're in these different cultural contexts. But also looking at, what does discrimination abroad actually look like? I have some examples here, along with different quotes from students. And again, this is not an all-inclusive list. Discrimination takes form in many ways, but these are just some things that we've heard about from students. So the first one is having comments made about one's appearance. A student who studied abroad in Italy said she heard, or people would question, like, are you sure you're not Roma? Because you look Roma to me. Roma is a minority population or minoritized group in Italy from India. So they have they're people of color who
are treated really bad in this society and are stigmatized in the society. And just because the student might have shared their skin color, they were automatically presumed to identify as that group. Students have also talked about experiencing, okay, this word is always, it gets me every time, fetishization and objectification. So one student said, while we were touring, many of the patrons were asking to touch my hair, take pictures of me and with me, and openly stared as they walked past me. This is a student who studied abroad in China. And in fact, I experienced this myself. I used to lead programs for high school students abroad, and I took a group of students to Mexico once. And 2 of my students had braids in their hair. And one time we went to a mall and we saw this group of people just taking pictures of us. And so I went up to them like, why are you taking pictures of us? Like, that's super rude doing that without asking our permission. They're like, we're just so blown away by their hair. We've never seen anything like it before. Some people go abroad and experience language discrimination. So let's say you study abroad in a predominantly Black country, like the student who studied in Botswana. Even though you might identify just based on skin color alone, there are all these other, ways that you experience cultural dissonance. One, in language, people might say, oh, you don't speak Swana? What are you even doing here then? And then finally, something that we might not think about initially, but experiencing microaggressions from peers and host nationals. So a student said, when a host country professor asked if race was still an issue in the United States, the white kids were like, no, we don't think so. We have a Black president now, so life is great. So I was like, okay, once again, you don't have to go through some of the things that I do, but okay. And I said, no, I think it is still very much an issue in America as well. And then they looked at me again like, oh, this girl. So this is a student who was studying abroad in India. And I can speak, based on my own experience. When I studied abroad in Brazil, I was the only student of color out of 25 other students. And I felt that the students that I were with were very culturally insensitive. So I only actually ended up making one friend. And the reason that we bonded was because we were both genuinely interested in Brazilian culture and learning the Portuguese language. So in a sense, that was an isolating experience for me.
Could I add something?
Please.
In terms of the classroom experience, that reminded me, I was in my program, everyone was from a UC, so everyone spoke English, but our history professor, even though he taught the history class in Spanglish, some English and some Spanish, he wasn't super comfortable speaking English. And we had a discussion about feminism in Spain and the political sphere, and one of the students brought up machismo, and he was comparing it to feminism, and this is an American student. And I disagreed with him, but it was kind of hard to have that discussion be facilitated by a professor who didn't speak English confidently. So it ended up not being as productive a discussion as it could have been because of the language barrier. And although I felt comfortable speaking in Spanish, the other student didn't feel comfortable speaking in Spanish. So we had the discussion in English, and the professor didn't really moderate it as well as it could have been moderated because of the language barrier. So I think that's something that is definitely worth mentioning, because it's not always the students from the host university, but sometimes, the other American students that are with you.
Absolutely. Great example, Aya. Thank you. So now we're kind of going to dive a little bit deeper and look at, obviously the experience studying abroad as an ABC student is going to look different for every single person who does it. But there might be certain, successes and challenges that you experience while you're in different spaces. And we're going to explore that a little bit more and really get insight from our panelists about this. So first, just these are broad strokes of different successes and challenges that we've read about in the literature and anecdotally. So looking at what the experience might be in predominantly Black countries. Different successes students have talked about is connecting with heritage. So learning more about their ancestral roots, cultural roots, historical roots, what have you. Being part of the majority for the first time, experiencing racial freedom and just looking around and everyone looking like you. That's something myself that I experienced when I went to Brazil. It's a very mixed heritage culture, and I didn't realize the extent of what that really meant until I was there. And I was like, wow, I mean, you see people across the spectrum, and they're a very united nation in Brazil. So that was a different experience for me. You may gain a deeper understanding of self. So maybe by the end of it, you're more equipped to answer questions about who you are and where you came from. And then finally, hair care, slaying on a budget, because you are in a country in which many people have similar identity, physical identity markers as you. You can get your hair done for the cheap. You can find all the good hair care products. Yeah. And then looking at some of the different challenges that students might experience in these spaces. One, cultural dissonance, so not feeling a part of or accepted by the host culture. Now, this could take place, maybe there's a language barrier, or maybe, there's just many different cultural differences that while you may look like a part of the culture, culturally speaking, you're very different because, again, as we talked on earlier, those inherent American values that you hold. Some students experience unmet expectations, so not feeling connected the way you thought you would. This might happen if, you're an American abroad, and so you might be exploited like many Americans are, when it comes to bargaining or, being charged higher prices or whatever it might look like. But then some students have expressed, hurt and confusion when they may have studied abroad in a predominantly Black country, but then their white peers get more attention than them because the people of that country are not as used to seeing their white peers. So then there's those tensions that way as well. And then the final thing I wanted to talk on was just, a repression of other identities. So yes, you may be in a country where for the first time everyone looks like you, but then now you have to repress these other parts of yourself. So the one example I pulled here is being Black and queer abroad. So just looking at this here, if you were to study in Africa, there are 4 countries where you can be executed for identifying as part of the LGBTQIA+ community. And then there's many other countries where it's illegal. And this is not just in Africa, but in many other countries around the world where there is a lack of acceptance for people from the LGBTQIA+ community. Again, this is just one example of what that might look like. And now quickly going to look at some of the successes and challenges when we study abroad in a predominantly white and or Asian country. So some students have actually talked about experiencing racial freedom in these spaces. They reported that the color of their skin didn't matter in places like France. You only felt different because you were American. You didn't feel different because you were Black. Again, going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. There's a lot of cross-cultural learning that takes place, just seeing the influence that African-American culture has had throughout the world. So listening to hip hop in Korea and Korean hip hop, or experiencing jazz in Copenhagen. It's just really incredible to see how our culture has permeated, the entirety of the world in so many different ways. And just experiencing empowerment, successfully moving your body and your belongings through foreign train and transportation systems. I mean, especially in Europe, where you're taking the train everywhere, missing the train, talking to someone about how to get on the next train, overcoming all of these different, language barriers that you may experience is a really empowering feeling. But at the same token, there are that much more challenges when you're in these spaces. So, anti-Blackness is real here in the US and all around the rest of the world. Looking at Europe specifically, there is a current refugee crisis there. So Black students have talked about being misidentified as belonging to other minoritized groups, and may experience discrimination based on how the groups are stigmatized, like we saw with the student who studied abroad in Italy being identified as Roma. Students also experience stereotypes. So, people assuming that because you're a Black American abroad, that you must be a celebrity or a singer or actor or a basketball player. We used to have an EOP counselor who studied abroad in Hong Kong, and he was a tall Black male, and everyone thought he was a basketball player while he was studying abroad.
And, you know, they weren't like, oh, you're this basketball player, like he looked like someone. No, it was just because he was tall and black. While we talked about in the other slide, you know, being able to slay on a budget when you're in predominantly black country and predominantly white or Asian countries, there is very limited hair care. In fact, when I studied abroad in Argentina, I brought like 2 huge things of just shampoo and conditioner because I didn't think I'd be able to find it while I was down there. And because, you know, maybe the country where you're going to, people don't share your same physical identity markers. So being conscious of that. But also racial isolation is a thing. You know, being the only ABC student on a study abroad program, I shared what that experience was like for me in Brazil. And I don't know if any of our other panelists will speak to it later. But, you know, when you're in a program with 20 plus students and you're the only one who identifies as you, you know, you don't have anyone who you can really share that experience or reflect on what the experience is like. You're more so like trying to internalize these things yourself, which can be really difficult. But I feel like I've just talked way too much, and I really want to give this over to our panelists because their experiences are the reason that we're here. So we're going to go from panelist to panelist. They'll have each 3 to 5 minutes to talk about some of the successes, challenges that they experienced while they were in their study abroad countries, and what it was really like to be them and navigate those different intercultural spaces. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to Chelsea.
Okay. I studied abroad in Barbados really because I was tired of being at a PWI and just not being a minority. So I wanted to go to a country that was going to be I was going to be in the majority. So I chose Barbados, and honestly, it was the best thing I could have did. I think it retained me to continue my education afterwards, and I'm so blessed to have that experience. And so one of my big successes is that before I went to Barbados, I'd never been outside the US. Like how Ashley was saying, I got my passport just to go study abroad. And so I was really nervous before I went, but my biggest success when getting there was really immersing myself into the campus community. And so in the school I went to, they had different Caribbean island organizations. And so each week they would have their own type of week where they would share their culture. So they'll basically have like food, like say on Wednesdays, or they'll throw like a party on Fridays. And so I really tried to like go to all of them and anything I was being hosted because I thought I was only going to meet people from Barbados, but I met a lot of people from other Caribbean islands and lands. And so it was very powerful for me to see so many different types of Blackness in that space and just understanding that we come from different places, but we have like general understandings for certain things. And so that was really my big success, is being more social than I usually am in the United States, because if you know me, I really like to mind my business. But I tried my best. I was out there doing my best, going outside. I met 2 people who also were from the UC system, and we became really close friends. And I also where I lived with other people from the island of Grenada and Jamaica. We came pretty close, and we started to hang out a lot. And so that was a really big success for me. Some of the challenges for me was that cultural norm of being American. So like there's certain things that we just grow up learning, like where I'm from. But if I talk about it, like say like abortion and things like that, it was kind of like taboo, or like we never talked about that growing up. And so at times my ideas seemed kind of radical to people, and I'm like, this is just normal to me, like this is just what I know. And that was kind of a challenge, but it really wasn't too big. Like it didn't stop me at all. If anything, it made me understand like the history of like how people are taught certain things or not taught other things. And then I really did like just smoothly glide into being in Barbados. I looked like everybody there, so everybody thought I was from a different island. I would tell them, you know, I was from this island, this state, and they would believe it. So I got away with a lot of stuff, but I think that it was something that I really wanted. Like, I just love being around Black people and being surrounded by such greatness, really. And so navigating my identity was really easy for me. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. Going on to Blue.
Hi. Hello. So, yeah, so I studied abroad in France. And honestly, I feel like I had a really great experience for study abroad, and I feel blessed to be able to say that. But I honestly did not think I was even going to be able to study abroad because I am studying engineering, and I don't know of many people in engineering that were able to study abroad. But luckily, I don't know, I was able to finesse my schedule around a little bit, and I stayed a 5th year so that I would be able to take a quarter and go. And I just knew that with this opportunity, I wanted to make the most of it, like literally just say yes to everything and try to do everything that I could. Because I have 2 sisters and they both studied abroad, and like my younger sister studied abroad like 3 or 4 times. So I was just like, this is my opportunity. And I feel like some of my successes were the fact that I feel like I really did take advantage of every opportunity. I was able to like squeeze in a lot of traveling while I was there. I went to 100 countries. No, I didn't. I was able to squeeze in 8 different countries, which just seems so cool. And I can't even believe I'm able to say that right now. But just taking advantage of every opportunity and really putting myself out there. Like I know I'm a outgoing person, but I didn't know to what extent I was. And it really took me, being in a different country, to really push myself out of my box, and meet new people and be independent. Like if people didn't want to go to, or get involved with anything that I wanted to do, I just went on my own. And that's how a solo trip happened to Portugal. So I was just like, nobody wants to go to Portugal, I'm going to go by myself. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. So yeah, I would say successes were just like being able to really take advantage of every opportunity. Some of the challenges, I don't know, I feel like I'm not going to say I didn't face any challenges, but there wasn't anything that's just like standing out. Wow, that was really hard for me. I feel like France was great. I know you mentioned earlier that we don't really, or students have reported not really feeling like they stick out in France. And I actually agree with that. I feel like there's a lot of diversity in France. And while the language barrier was a little hard, it was a good challenge because it's like, okay, I want to learn this new language and it's going to encourage me to do that. And I feel like the Parisians were really understanding, and they actually worked with me. And as long as they saw that I was trying, like people were really accepting of it. And then how did my identity as an ABC STEM student play? So the only time I really felt my like engineering background kind of come into or have an effect on my time there was in my classes, honestly, because I was taking a lot of GE classes, or classes that weren't related to my major. And so there were history, language classes, and I was just not used to writing papers and reading essays, which I probably should. I know I should read more and practice my writing, but I just have been out of practice. And so I think that was the only time that I really felt my STEM background come into effect. But yeah.
Great, thank you, Talu. And again, you guys will be able to ask many more questions once we get through the presentation. But next, Aya.
Hey, so I studied in Cordoba, Spain, which is in the south of Spain. And some of my successes, I think, was, well, being able to study abroad in the first place. Like, my parents didn't want me to go, but I learned to convince them, and I created a very detailed spreadsheet with a lot of information, like, how long the program was and different benefits. This specific program was focused on Andalusian and Islamic art. and my family were Muslim, so it was really important to look at the Muslim history there. And it was really interesting because, like Ashley said, there's a lot of rich history in Europe, and it's so old. Like, you're in these buildings that are thousands and thousands of years old. So that was something that definitely attracted me to the program that I was in. Also, we got to go to Morocco, and that was so fun. I had been to Morocco previously with my mom, but we went to the south, and this trip took us to the north. And we had some really cool conversations with the young people in Morocco. And I noticed on the list, Morocco was one of the places that LGBTQ plus people, it's not allowed, like it's illegal. But in those conversations, all the students were really open to having those conversations about whether it's religion or their identity as African or like an Arab, and kind of relating to anti-Blackness. And I was kind of curious about if you speak Arabic, do you identify as someone who's African, you know? So we had some really cool conversations. In Spain, I was one of 3 Black students in my program. So I got lucky to have some people who could share my experiences and some of the struggles that I faced, whether it was just being stared at, or a couple times like an old guy would just be really blatantly rude to us or make us uncomfortable. And in those times, I think I built my confidence because I would try to talk to him in Spanish, like, what do you want from us? Like, can I help you type thing? Or just ignore it and move on because, you know, sometimes that would exasperate the situation. I think that would be the only time that I experienced like an overt challenge of someone like publicly staring at me or saying something. But overall, everyone in my program was so friendly and so nice. Our Spanish teacher had a very clear bias towards the white students. She preferred the white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed students over us, other students who were not white, basically. And so that was a bit difficult. And I don't think it ever really got addressed, but I do think that it pushed me to do better than them. Not in like, they were good people, but just in that proving that race has nothing to do with your ability to learn a language, you know? So that's something that I also experienced. And then my identity, I really think that I'm also pretty outgoing. So I think that helped because in that the program is not very long. So I kind of had to just jump right in and take advantage of, in the first week, we're going to do a language kind of exchange program, like just signing up for that and really putting myself out there and speaking the language, because that was a really big goal of mine. Along with traveling to other cities in Spain, the program didn't really facilitate that much local travel. So pretty much everyone in the program would go to a different city every weekend, or go to Portugal or France or something like that. So yeah.
And Aya, quickly, do you want to speak about the challenge of the cultural norm of kissing?
Oh yeah. Okay, so I was with the host family, and my host mom they told us at the beginning orientation that your host mom's gonna kiss you like on each cheek. And my actual mom was there because she had traveled with me to Spain. And so like when I met my host mom, she like kissed me on both cheeks. I wasn't expecting it, even though they told me. And I'm used to cheek kisses because a lot of my friends and family are like Pakistani, Afghani, and they do the cheek kiss too. But it's the other side. It's not the right to left, it's left to right. Anyway, we ended up creating a schedule. We understood after lunch we would do a cheek kiss, and that's how I knew lunch was over. Because it was super awkward. We'd just be sitting there like, okay, can I leave now? Like, I didn't want to be rude, you know? So if I got up, gave her a cheek kiss, I was like, okay, deuces, I'll go to my room now. So yeah, that was kind of an interesting cultural difference for sure.
Thank you, Aya. And last but certainly not least, Alexis.
Hi, my name is Alexis. I studied in Paris, France this past winter quarter. One reason I kind of chose this program, which was a social justice and activism program, was like, because I'm a lit major, and I was like, what can I do? Where do lit majors go? And I was like, I was doing all the research, and this one, I guess, fit me the most, because that's something, activism is something I'm like also interested in besides literature. So I chose this program. And I also always been wanting to go to France since like high school. and like studying French, and like all my teachers would tell me about like where they were from, and I was like, okay, so I have to go there. So it fit perfectly for me, and yeah, that's why I ended up in that program. Um, some successes I had, for me, it's mostly like traveling alone, because this was also my first time going out of the country, let alone by myself. So like just navigating a whole new city, a whole new country was like really, like I was proud of myself for doing that just in 10 weeks, like the 10 weeks we had. So yeah, and also like once getting in Paris, like traveling to and from places like the school and like the metro system was like really freaking me out at first. And I was like, even taking the buses in Santa Cruz, sometimes I would get on the wrong bus and I'm just like, wait. So I was already nervous about that, but like I ended up figuring it all out. So like that was one thing. Like it might seem little, like just traveling, but like I am always fearing getting lost. So like I didn't get lost. So that was successful for me. Um, Another success, I guess, like it kind of led me to wanting to travel more in the future, because like traveling I didn't really think too much about like after school, but now I kind of want to go more places with like my friends and family in the future when I'm done with school. So I guess it kind of sparked the traveling bug in me. And also returning to Paris is also something I really want to do. Yeah, some challenges, I guess, where I battled like homesickness like halfway through the quarter. So like that was one struggle for me the most, because I never really got homesick before. So this was my first time really feeling that and what that really meant. So I guess trying to navigate what it meant to be homesick and like what I was missing and what I was not doing. So kind of after that, like trying to get over it, like I started like exploring more a little by myself, like solo trips to cafes, I guess. Um, just going, I went to parks was like one of the favorite things I did, like just parks and the gardens there. So I'd like explored a couple of those by myself. And those were like really relaxing for me, because that's like, I like chill to do chill things, I guess. So like the gardens and parks were like my go-to spots. Like on the way to school, I would like stop at the garden or something. So yeah, that was a challenge for me, but like I kind of got over kind of, yeah. But, and also navigating a white European country. I like in what the student said earlier about France not being like too much of a challenge in terms of like being Black and not finding your space in the country. Cause like I did feel like more, because there was this one time me and my roommate, we went to an Italian restaurant in Paris, and we sat next to a white couple, and like I kind of saw like stares, but I was like more curious if like it was because we were speaking English and not French, versus like whether we were Black, I was Black and like she was Asian. I was like, I don't think it's really that. I think it was like, oh, what are, they're not speaking French, who are they? So I was like, I just noticed small things like that. So yeah, that was interesting for me. And also like in terms of like my Black identity out there were like some things I would try to do. Like there was one night we went to like this dance club thing, and they were playing like, it was like hip hop R&B night. And once we went in there, I was like, I bet there's going to be a whole bunch of Black people there. And I was like hella excited like before going, and like they were playing Drake, Ella Mai, Beyonce, and I was like, wait. So I was like, that was a good night. So just like seeing like a room full of Black people was like really cool for me. So yeah, that was something fun. But yeah, the student really highlighted when they said like it's more of like American versus like European, and I really understood that with this trip. So yeah, those are just like some highlights, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you, Alexis. So in the interest of everyone's time, we're going to finish by asking the panelists a couple lingering questions. And the first of those is, how are you all able to pay for your study abroad programs? And whoever wants to tackle this question, please feel free.
So it was pretty interesting, because I first started off with just financial aid. I hadn't saved up any money, but just financial aid. But then I just started traveling so much, and then I ran out of money. And Uh, but then tax return season came around. So then that was my saving grace. But then I also wanted to do a big trip. I ended up in Cape Town, but I didn't have enough money to go there. So then my best friend actually helped me pay for a ticket. But to be honest, like I don't regret anything. Like I would go into debt to travel and get in all the experiences. And I feel like if you need to go into debt, I mean, I'm not going to encourage anything, but I feel like it's worth it.
When I'm in debt, I'll be like, Tolu told me to go into debt to travel to. Okay.
I guess I could go next. Financial aid, and also I worked at the dining hall the quarter before I left, so I guess I saved some money there. And like Ashley mentioned, I did receive the Gilman scholarship. I applied to that one, which was, it gave me a good amount to have like spending money while I was in Paris. And I applied to that one, and I applied to the Promise. I think it was a Promise Award. I didn't receive that one, but yeah, I don't know if we wanted me to go more into the Gilman, but
What was the process of applying to a scholarship like? I think a lot of times students are like, think that it's like this big process, which it can be, but it can also be worth it. So can you just talk about the application process itself and how you actually found out about the different scholarship opportunities?
yeah. Well, one way I found out was like all the emails and like checking the UCEAP website, and those were like, that was one of the main ones listed. And also Ashley told me about it in person when I asked. So the application process was like, applying for scholarships was something like I'd never loved doing like in high school and stuff. So like this time I just narrowed it down to like find two main ones and like work on that all summer. So that's what I did. They were both essay based. This one, you had to do, I forget how many words, but like you had to do a statement about how you would, I think it was how did financial aid help, or like how did the Gilman help you paying for your program, and how do you plan on like affecting your campus. I think that was the main, like helping your campus with your trip, in terms of community and like getting other people engaged with the scholarship with Gilman, with the Gilman program, and like just studying abroad in general. So yeah, I just basically spent the summer, so like 3 months, working on the paper or essay and like sending it to people, having people review it, and making sure I could turn it in by September or October. I think it was the end of September when I got back to school that quarter. So yeah, the process was like a little tricky for me, but I made sure to give myself time because sometimes I don't do that. But I knew this wasn't something that could be rushed, considering like it was 2 parts to it. So yeah, I gave myself time to think about, because the questions they asked me on the application was like made me think about the reason why I want to study abroad, kind of how we talked about earlier in the presentation. Like what do I want to do for myself, and what do I want to bring back to the community like once I leave France. So like I guess that was good for me in terms of like getting insight on like what I would be doing abroad before I even left. So yeah.
Thank you. And then Chelsea also mentioned that she used financial aid and also got 2 scholarships, including the UCAP Promise Award and the Stevenson College Scholarship. So there are, department scholarships, college scholarships, all offered through UCSC as well.
I'll throw this in. I don't know if it's an option anymore. While I was studying abroad, I was working part-time, but working remotely. I don't know if it's like an internship, but it was a job on campus over at the physical plant, and I just kind of worked with my boss to be able to work remotely, and it was like I was only working like 10 to 15 hours a week, but that translated in like, in a very big way considering the like currency difference. So if you can work remotely, I would encourage that.
Thank you. One thing I want to ask about is because 3 of our panelists actually were abroad during the onset of COVID-19, and I think a few of you had to leave your programs early. What was it like being abroad as all of this was kind of playing out? I mean, obviously it happened in Europe before it actually spread over here to the US. So what was the experience like for you, just, you know, being abroad, being away from your family and hearing about all of this that was going on?
I'll go first. I'll start by saying my program, it actually ended the day that Trump set the deadline for coming back to the US. So my program did not get ended early. However, because there were people who were on the semester program, their program got ended early. That being said, I wasn't planning on coming back to the US until like March 30th instead of March 13th. So I hadn't actually bought a return ticket, and that was stressful because 1, I didn't have that much money left, and 2, I thought I might get stuck in the UK. Although because of Brexit, technically the UK isn't part of the European Union anymore, and it ended up being that that wasn't the place, one of the places Trump had banned people from going from, before saying all people who had U.S. American passports could still come back to the U.S. So it was it was hard to get accurate information in terms of what was actually factually accurate and applied to me as a American passport holding citizen. That was just stressful because the program coordinators they were learning information as we were learning it. So that was stressful. I was lucky enough to get a flight back that wasn't too expensive. I was using Student Universe, actually. Yeah, I found a pretty good priced flight back. When I got to LAX, it was very hectic and I missed my next flight. And that was mostly because of the whole CDC line that was happening. And they didn't check us, actually. They said they were going to check us, like check our temperature and check to see if we had, I don't know, been exposed to coronavirus, but they didn't check us. And we just waited in that line for, I don't know what reason. It was overall a very stressful experience. I was lucky enough to have a friend traveling with me who also is from the Bay Area. So I had a partner like during that whole process when we stayed in London for a couple nights and then flew back to California. And that was like a saving grace. Like I'm so thankful for that because I would have been extremely overwhelmed to have to travel back home by myself while everything that was going on. So yeah.
Alexis, do you want to say something? Oh, so I was gonna say that I feel like during our program, or let me at least just speak for myself, I feel like it went from 0 to 100. And maybe this is my fault for not staying updated with the news and about the outbreak, but it just seemed like one night I had come back from a trip, and then there was an email sent out from our program about how the program got canceled. And then I went to sleep, and then the next morning, everybody had bought flight tickets back home. And I was like, oh, okay. But we still had a week. So basically the finals week was canceled, and everybody went back home. I was gonna stay until my originally planned ticket the following Sunday, but I'm lucky I didn't because the Tuesday I eventually left was the day that France closed their borders to leave. So I feel like it was a stressful process only in the fact that it just went from 0 to 100, and I didn't really know what to do. Yeah.
Did you have to self-quarantine when you got back to Lou?
I did, but I was at home, but I was definitely like not going anywhere outside of my home. Yeah, it was kind of tricky, but I definitely did like self-quarantine in some capacity.
And Alexis, do you want to share anything about the experience COVID-19 abroad?
I was actually in the same program as Salou, so like I agree it was hectic and like very like what's going on. But actually like me and my roommate, we were like both kind of like worried about the whole case, the number of cases. So we were literally checking the rise of the numbers every single day, like giving each other hourly updates. It kind of got ridiculous, but like it's kind of felt like what we had to do. And we kept like being on the phones with our moms. And like my mom was here like trying to like look up flights like 2 weeks before like it actually got canceled. And I was like, wait, so yeah, it was hectic. But I ended up getting a flight back home just in time. Yeah, it was, I wish that on no one, because like the program ending 1 week before it's supposed to actually end was kind of like a lot of people were disappointed, but I was concerned mostly like for safety. So yeah.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? We have one here from Monica for Toulouse. What factors made you certain that you wanted to stay an extra year for study abroad?
So the reason I had to stay an extra year is because with the way my schedule was, there's like a capstone that's a year long. And so I had to do that my 4th year. And so the only way I would have some time to go was if I stayed a 5th year. And luckily I had failed a class like 2 years ago that was only offered in the spring quarter. And so I would have a class to come back to. And that really helped for financial aid. But I knew I wanted to go abroad just because, like I said, my 2 sisters had went and they had like amazing experiences. And I was like, I want to be able to experience this. And I don't want my major to like hold me back. And so I knew, and plus I have a lot of friends that have already graduated and they're like, stay in school as long as you can because post-grad is just, it's not what everybody is expecting and it's not all it's cut out to be. So I was like, yeah, I could take some time, enjoy it, take some time to explore the world. I was like, I definitely will, I'll take whatever it takes to do that.
And with that, I would just like to take the time to thank everyone for watching today's important discussion. I especially want to thank our panelists for sharing their stories. If you yourself have any questions about identity-specific information, please contact your campus study abroad office. Good day to everyone.